The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 6, Section 3, Writings, Proses and Poems. Historical Evolution of India. Om Tat Sat. Om Namo Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya. Na asata sata jayate. Na asata sata jayate. Existence cannot be produced by non-existence. Existence cannot be produced by non-existence. Non-existence can never be the cause of what exists. Something cannot come out of nothing. That is a law of causation. Is omnipotent and knows to no time or place when it did not exist. Is a doctrine as old as the Aryan race, sung by its ancient poets seers, formulated by its philosophers, and made the cornerstone upon which the Hindu man, even of today, builds his whole scheme of life. There was an inquisitiveness in the race to start with, which very soon developed into a bold analysis, and though in the first attempt the work turned out might be little or like the attempts with shaky hands of the future master sculptor, it very soon gave way to strict science, bold attempts, and startling results. Its boldness made these men search every brick of every sacrificial altars, scan, cement, and pulverize every word of their scriptures, arranging and rearranging, doubt, deny, or explain the ceremonies. It turned their gods inside out and assigned only a secondary place to their omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent creator of the universe. Their ancestral Father in heaven, or through him altogether overboard, has useless and started a world religion without him, with even now the largest following of any religion. It evolved the science of geometry from the arrangement of bricks to build various altars, and startled the world with astronomical knowledge that arose from the attempts accurately to time after worship and oblation. It made their contribution to the science of the mathematics the largest of any race, ancient or modern, or their knowledge of chemistry, of metallic compounds in medicine, their scale of musical notes, their invention of the bow instruments, all of great service in the buildings of modern European civilization. It led them to invent the science of building up the child's mind through shining fables, of which every child in every civilized country learns in the nursery or the school and carries an expression through life. Behind and before this analytical keenness, behind and before this analytical keenness, covering it as in the velvet sheet, was the other great mental peculiarity of the race, poetic insight. Its religion, its philosophy, its history, its ethics, its political were its politics were all inlaid in the flower bed of the poetic imaginary, the miracle of language which was called Sanskrit or perfected, lending itself to expressing and manipulating them better than any other tongue. The aid of melodious numbers was evoked even to express the hard effects of mathematics. This analytic power and the boldness of the poetic vision which urged it onward are the two great internal causes in the makeup of Hindu race. They together they together formed as it were the keynote of the national character. This combination is what is always making the race press onwards beyond the senses. The secret of those used to manufacture, cultivate through the bars of iron, at playable enough to be easily bent into the circle. They wrote poetry in the silver and gold, and the symphony of jewels, the maze of marble wonders, the music of colors, the fine fibers which belong more to the fairyland of the dreams than to the real, have back to them thousands of years of working of these national traits, arts and sciences, even the realities of the domestic life, are covered with the mass of the poetic conception which are pressed forward till the sensual touches the supersensuous, and the real gets the rose who of the unreal. The earliest glimpse we have to this grace shows it already in the possession of the characteristic, has an instrument of some use in its hands. Many forms of religion and society must have been left behind in the onward march before we find the race as depicted in the scriptures, the Vedas, and organized pantheons, elaborate ceremonial divisions of society into the hereditary classes necessitated necessitated by the variety of occupations, a great many necessaries and good many luxuries of life are already there. Most modern scholars that agreed that surroundings as to climate and conditions purely Indian were not at working on the race. Onwards through several centuries we come to the multitude surrounded by the snow of Himalayas on the north and the heat of the south, vast plains, interminable forests through which mighty rivers roll their tides. We catch a glimpse of different races, Dravidians, Tartars, and Aboriginals, pouring in their coats of blood, of speech, of manners, of religion. And at last a great nation emerges to our view, still keeping still keeping the type of Aryans stronger, broader, and more organized by the assimilation. We find the central assimilative core giving it types and the character to the whole mass, clinging on with great pride to its name of Aryan, and though willing to give other races the benefit of its civilization, it was by no means willing to admit them within the Aryan pale. The Indian climate again gave a higher direction to the genius of the race. In the land where nature was propitious and yielded easy victories, the national mind started to grapple with the conquer the higher problems of life in the field of thoughts. Naturally, the thinker, the priest, became the highest class of the Indian society and not the man of the sword. The priest, again, even at that dawn of history, put most of their energy in elaborating rituals. And when the nation began to find the load of ceremonies and lifeless rituals too heavy, came the first philosophical speculations, and the royal race was the first to break through the maze of killing rituals. On the other hand, the majority of the priests, impelled by economical consideration, were bound to defend that forms of religion which made their existence a necessity of society and assigned them highest place in the scale of caste. On the other hand, the king castle, whose strong right hand guarded the nation, and whom no found itself as leading in the higher thoughts also, were loath to give up the first place to men who only knew how to conduct the ceremonials. There were then others recruited from both the priest and king castes, who ridiculously equally the ritualities and philosophers declared spiritualism as fraud and priestcraft, and upon and upheld the attainment of material comfort as the higher goal of life. The people tired of ceremonials and wondering at the philosophers, joined in the mass of materialistic. This was the beginning of the caste question and the triangular fight in India between ceremonial philosophy and materialism, which has come down unsolved to our own days. The first solution of the difficulty attempted was the application of the eclecticism, which from the earliest days that had caught the people to see in difference the same truth in various grapes. The great leaders of this school, Krishna himself of a royal race and his sermon, the Gita, have after various vicissitudes brought about by the upheaval of the Jain, Buddhist and other sects, fairly established themselves as the prophet of India and trust philosophy of life. Though the tension was toned down for the time, it did not satisfy the social wants which were among the causes. The claim of the king race to stand first in the scale of the caste and the popular intolerance of the priest privilege. Krishna had opened the gates of spiritual knowledge and attainment to all irrespective of sex, caste, but he left undisturbed the same problems on the social side. This again has become down to our own days in the spirit of the gigantic struggle of Buddhist, Vaishnavas, etc., to attain social equality for all. Modern India admits spiritual equality of all souls but strictly keep the social differences. Thus, we find the struggle renewed all along the line of the 17th century before the Christ era and finally in the 6th overwhelming the ancient orders of the things under Shankya Muni, the Buddha, in their reaction against the privileged priesthood, Buddhists swept off almost every bit of old rituals of the Vedas, subordinated the god of the Vedas to the position of servant of to their own human saints, and declared the creator and superior ruler as an invention of the priestcraft and superstitions. But the aim of Buddhism was reform of the Vedic religion by standing against ceremonial requiring offerings of animals, against hereditary caste and exclusive priesthood, and against belief of permanent soul. It never attempted to destroy that religion or overturn the social order. It introduced a vigorous method by organizing the class of sannyasins into strong monastic brotherhood and the Brahmavadinis into the bodies of nuns by introducing images of saint in the place of the altar fires. It is probable that the reformers had for centuries the majority of the Indian people with them. The older forces were never entirely pacified, but they underwent a good deal of modification during the centuries of Buddhism or Buddhistic supremacy. In the ancient India, the centers of national life were always the intellectual and spiritual and not the political. Of old as now, political and social powers has been always subordinated with the spiritual and intellectual powers. The outburst of the national life was round college of the sages and spiritual teachers. We thus find the Samhitas of the Panchalas of the Kashyas of Varanasi, the Maithilas standing out as great scientists of spiritual culture and philosophy, even in the Upanishad. Again, this center in turn became the focus of political ambitions of the various divisions of Aryans. The great epic Mahabharata tells us the war of the Kauravas and Pandavas for supremacy over the nation, in which they destroyed each other. The spiritual supremacy veered round and centered in the east among the Megadas and Maithalas, and after Kaurav Panchalas war, a sort of supremacy was obtained by the king of Magadha. The Buddhist Reformation and its chief field of activity were also in the same Eastern religion, and when the Maurya kings, forced possibly forced possibly by the bar sinisters of their occultance, patronized and led the new movement, the new priest power joined hands with the political power of the empire of the Patliputra. The popularity of Buddhism and its fresh vigor made the Maurya king the greatest emperor that India ever had. The power of Maurya souvenirs made Buddhist that worldwide religion that we see even today. The exclusiveness of the old form of Vedic religion debarred it from taking ready help out from outside. At the same time, it kept it pure and free from many debasing elements which Buddhism, in its propagandist zeal, was forced to assimilate. This extreme adaptability in the long run made Indian Buddhism lose almost all its individuality, and extreme desire to be of the people made it unfit to cope with the intellectual forces of the mother religion. In the few centuries, the Vedic party, in the meanwhile, got rid of the good deals of its most objectable features as animal sacrifice and took less from the rival daughters in the judicious use of images, temple processions, and other impressive performances, and stood ready to take within her fold the whole empire of Indian Buddhism, already tolerating of its fall. And the crash came with the Scythian invasion and the total destruction of the empire of Patliputra. The invader the invaders, already incensed at the invasion of their Central Asiatic home by the preachers of Buddhism, found in the sun worship of the Brahmins a great sympathy with their own scholar or solar religion. And when the Buddhist Brahminist party were ready to adopt and spiritualize many of the customs of the newcomers, the invaders threw themselves heart and soul into the Brahminic cause. Then there is a veil of darkness and shifting shadows. There are tumult of wars, rumors of massacres, and next scene arises upon new phase of things. The emperor of Magadha was gone. Most of the northern India was under the rule of petty chief, always at war with one another. Buddhism was almost extinct, except in some east and the Himalayan province and in the extreme south. And the nation, after centuries of struggle against the power of hereditary priesthood, awoke to find itself in the clutches of the double priesthood of hereditary Brahmins and exclusive monks of a new regime, with all the powers of Buddhistic organization and without their sympathy for the people. The renascent India, bought by the valor and the blood of the heroic Rajput, defined by the merciless intellectual of the Brahmin from the same historical thought center of Mithila, led by a new philosophical impulse organized by Shankara and his band of sannyasin, and a beautiful and beautified by the art and literature of the court of Malwa, arose on the ruins of the old. The task before it was profound, problem vaster than any their ancestors had ever faced. A comparatively small and compact race of same blood and speech, the same social and religious aspiration, trying to save its unity by unscalable walls around itself, grew huge by multiplication and addition during the Buddhistic supremacy, and it was divided by race, color, speech, spiritual intellect, and social ambitions into hopelessness, jarring factions, and this had to be unified and welded into one gigantic nation. This task Buddhism had also come to solve and had taken it up when the proportions were not so vast. So long it was a question of Aryanizing the other type that were pressing for admission, and thus out of different elements many making a huge Aryan body. In spite of concession, in spite of concession and compromises, Buddhism was eminently successful and remained the national religion of India. But the time came when the allurement of the sensual form of worship indiscriminatingly taken in along with the various low races were too dangerous for the Central Aryan core, and the longer contact would certainly have destroyed the civilization of the Aryans. They came a natural reaction for the self-preservation, and Buddhism has a separate sect ceased to live in the most part of its land of birth. The reaction movement led in close succession by the Kumarila in the north, Shankara and Ramanuj in the south, has become the last embodiment of that vast accumulation of the sect and doctrines and spiritual called as Hinduism. For the last 1,000 years or more, its great task has been assimilation, with now and then an outburst of reformation. This reaction first wanted to revive the rituals of the Vedas, failing which it made the Upanishad or the philosophical portions of the Vedas its basics. It brought Vyasa's system of Mimamsa philosophy and Krishna's sermon, the Gita, to the forefront, and all succeeding movements have followed the same. The movement of Shankara forced its way through its high intellectual, but it could be a little service to the masses because of its adherence to strict caste laws, very small scope for ordinary emotions, and making Sanskrit the only vehicle of communication. Ramanujan, on the other hand, with the most practical philosophy, a great appeal to the emotions and the entire denial of the birthrights before the spiritual attainments, and appeals through the popular tongue, completely succeeded in bringing the mass back to the Vedic religion. The northern reaction of the ritualism was followed by the filthful glory of the Malwa Empire. With the destruction of that in the short time, northern India went to sleep as it were for a long period, to be rudely awakened by the thundering onrush of the Mohammedan cavalry across the pass of Afghanistan. In the south, however, the spiritual upheaval of Ramanuj and Shankara was followed by the usual Indian sequence of united races and powerful emperors. It was the home of refuge of Indian religion and civilization. When northern India from sea to sea lay bound at the feet of the Central Asiatic conquerors, the Mohammedan tried for centuries to subjuggle the south, but can scarcely be said to have got even a strong foothold. And when the strong and united emperor of Mughals was were near completing its conquest, the hills and plateaus of the south poured in their bands of white pleasanting horsemen, determined to die for the religion which Ramadas preached and Tuka sang. And in the short time, the gigantic emperor of Mughals was only a name. The movement in the northern India during the Mohammedan period are characterized by their uniform attempt to hold the masses back from the joining the religion of the conquerors, which brought in its train social and spiritual equality for all. The Friar of the Orders, founded by the Ramanand, Kabir, Daddu, Chaitanya, or Nayak were all agreed in preaching the equality of men. Differing from each other in philosophy, their energy was, for the most part, spent in checking the rapid conquest of Islam among the masses, and they had very little left to give birth to new thoughts and aspirations. Though evidently successful in their purpose of keeping the masses within the fold of the old religion and tempting the fanaticism of the Mohammedans, they were mere apologists struggling to obtain permissions to live. One great prophet, however, arose in the north, Govind Singh, the last guru of the Sikh, with creative geniuses, and the result of his spiritual work was followed by the well-known political organization of the Sikhs. We have seen throughout the history of India, spiritual upheaval is almost always succeeded by the political unity, extending over more or less areas of the continent, which in its turn helps to strengthen the spiritual aspiration that brings it to beings. But the spiritual aspiration that preceded the rise of Maharathas or the Sikh emperor was entirely reactionary. We seek in vain to find in the court of Pune and Lahore even a ray of reflection of the intellectual glory which surrounded the court of Mughals, but much less the brilliancy of Malwa and Vidyanagara. It was intellectually the darkest period of the Indian history, and both this meteoric emperor represented the upheaving of a mass fanaticism and hating culture with all their hearts, lose all their motive powers as soon as they had succeeded in destroying the rules of the hated Muhammadans. Then there came again a period of confusion, friends and fears, the Mughal emperors and its destroyers. Until then, peaceful foreign traders, French and English, all joined in the meals of fight. For more than half centuries, there was nothing but war and pillage and destruction. And when the smoke and dust cleared, England was stalking victorious over the rest. There has been half of the century of peace and law and order under the sway of the Britain. Time alone will prove if it is the order of progress or not. There have been a few religious movements among us, the Indian people, during the British rule, following the same line that was taken up by the Northern Indian sect during the swarm of the Emperor of Delhi. They are voices of the dead and the dying, the feeble stones of the terrored people, pleading for permission to live. They are ever eager to adjust their spiritual and social surroundings according to the taste of the conquerors. If they are only left the right to live, especially the sect under the English dominations, in which social differences with the conquering race are more glaring than the spiritual. The Hindu sect of the century seem to have set one idea of truth before them, the approval of their English masters. No wonder that this sect have mushrooms leaves a life, mushroom leaves to live. The vast body of the Indian people religiously hold aloof from them, and the only popular recognition they get is the jubilation of the people when they die. But possibly for some time yet, it cannot be otherwise.